Hello, everyone. Welcome to this BFI London Film Festival event as part of the LFF for Free programme. My name is Caleb J. Roberts, my pronouns are he, him, and I am a BFI Film Academy Young Programmer for this year, and I am very pleased to introduce you all today to Transforming Screens. So, Transforming Screens explores the narratives, spaces, and futures being transformed by transgender and non-binary voices. We're going to navigate some topics across representation, accessibility, opportunity, and joy, where we are joined by our lovely panel of some of the leading trans and non-binary filmmakers, writers, actors, consultants, performers making waves in the film industry and television across the UK and Ireland, which I'm very pleased for. So I think we'll start off with just an introduction to each of you. One by one, we'll go through you, and if you want to say your name, your pronouns, and a little bit about your job and what you do, I think we'll start with Becky.
Hiya, my name is Becky Cheatle. Pronouns are she, her. And I am a director, writer, and a comedian in Dublin, Ireland.
Hi, my name is Sophia. My pronouns are they, them. I am a Scottish Hong Konger. Most of my career has been in Hong Kong. And I'm a producer, director.
Hey, I'm Elijah. I'm from the Midlands. I'm living in London. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a writer and an actor.
Hi, my name is Alia Rourke. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a stand-up comedian, screenwriter, accidental actress, and a reluctant producer from Dublin, Ireland.
Hi, I'm Nim. My pronouns are they, them. I'm from and based in London. I'm a trans activist and writer, and I work as a gender identity consultant in film, supporting and advocating for trans cast and crew's safety and good experiences on film sets.
Amazing. It's really great to have such a variety of people across the UK and Ireland and also in job role. And when I was coming together with this panel, I wanted to look at sort of three areas in particular across the transformation of the film industry with trans and non-binary voices through narrative, space on a production, and the future of trans and non-binary people in the film industry itself. So I kind of want to open this conversation with the question of how representation begins on the page, and what does this look like across productions where we, as trans and non-binary people, are at the helm of these things. What does that look like for you guys? If anyone wants to take it first.
Well, Caleb, for me, because everything is about me, it's about putting myself on the page. Or no, I'm only kidding. It's about putting people like me on the page and just writing about our own experiences as a screenwriter, particularly in a way that's authentic to our actual experiences rather than having them filtered through a cis writer's voice.
No, definitely. And I think that can, there's an authenticity that obviously bleeds through there when you are given that support to be able to tell your own story. And maybe sort of, Elijah, I know that you've been brought into like a writer's room and stuff like that. How does that function as a trans person being brought in and trusted with that sort of to bring that representation to life on the page?
It's exciting, but it's also challenging because it's kind of like, I'm just one person. I can't speak for a whole world of wonderful people. I can only speak for myself, but I can offer more authentic insights and push back on things that I don't feel are okay or perhaps going down a dangerous path. But I mean, it's so much about like the wider group of people involved, because it's not like I've been lucky to not be like one-off person, kind of often one-off person, but also not just one person in a creative process, and that's when it's actually starts making a difference. So you're not that one person that everyone's going to for that thing. I find it challenging when these like shows and stuff operate with in like sections. You've got your writers, and then you've got crew, and it's all this stuff operates so separately, then I don't have any like control or say further down the line in terms of like crewing up and like editing and like how those things, like all those conversations with like the commissioners and all that stuff, like that's a bit scary, I think.
Ali and I were very lucky with our short that it was a very personal story for Ali, and we were able to get away with a lot of our creative choices by just going, oh yeah, a trans person wouldn't say that, or that wouldn't happen, and we use that probably way too much. But I was asked to direct a short film it's still in the application phase, but it was written by cis people about a trans child, and it was a very nice script. But the child in question wasn't in the script, and I think that's a little bit of a problem. I think that you should show the person, because it's a lot of people talking about a trans person who is not present in the story at all, which is very much like the way we're talked about in the media and stuff. So I came up with some ideas based on my own childhood, and the writer took them on board and worked them into the script. And then I'm working on something else now with a writer and producer. We're trying to get a feature film off the ground, and there's a trans protagonist in that. And even that person, very well meaning, you have to have this discussion about how there really should be, the actor should be trans. And he just didn't see that. He didn't, and you have to explain that to him. So I think it's important that we're in the room whenever there's something about trans people being made.
I think for me personally, I was kind of spoilt in the first sort of proper filmmaking project I worked on was with Becky, and it was our project. So it was two trans people taking a lead on a project about trans people. And that was such a relief. And now I have to go back out into the big, bold, real world of filmmaking and work with a lot of cis people. It's a lot different. It's a lot harder to fight your corner in those senses. So I think, as Elijah was saying, it's so much important to have more than just a token trans voice in the room. If you're doing projects about trans people, like the team needs to be full of multiple trans people.
I would be really interested to hear sort of from Nim and Sophia, from that sort of producer and consultant basis, what that looks like on your end when someone's approaching you with an idea that's maybe written by a cis person and needs that help, or who is coming from a trans perspective, but maybe doesn't know how to sort of get out there in that sort of larger world with that story.
I mean, I've been working in this industry for a while, and I think in recent years I've been quite lucky. My position, I wouldn't say position of power, but being a producer, I'm quite selective on and very lucky to have that privilege to be selective in the kind of work I want to do and what I want to give back to the community. So, I very lucky. I met a friend when we were working on some Marvel production in Hong Kong, and they went through a transition of themselves, and now when we made a film, it was unprecedented during that time in Hong Kong to have a trans film like that to come out. So it was pretty wonderful that my journey in trans filmmaking was back then with someone so personal. But being an independent filmmakers, I think you all have talked about it. The good thing is it's very much in your control, in terms of where you want the narrative to go, how you want to present the material that you have, given it was such a personal project. So I was very lucky to have done that. And over the years, I have made quite a few queer films. I produced quite a few queer films, but predominantly there have been self-funded, and finding investors is one of the hardest things. They say pink dollar is this pink dollar, but it's not that easy when you have to convince them to get money out from their pockets. It does start from the top. I mean, I literally just did a panel about representation on Saturday, and we were just talking like, how can we nurture that change? It does start from the top in terms of the commercial world, and the bigger studios. It has to come from the top, and who's at the top? Well, we all know what kind of people are seen at the top. So yeah, now that I'm back here in UK, I'm very fortunate. Most of my career has been from Hong Kong. I am making a translate film, and I just read the script, but I just knew I had to do it. So within the space of a month, we managed to raise funds to make the film. I mean, it's still difficult. It's still quite a slim budget, but you drive change by putting out representation material that people can see, like, look, there was a genuine interest. We raised the funds in less than a month, and Lily Wachowski, all the way from America, put money into it. So it does reach places. You just have to believe in the material, believe in the director, believe in the writer. So that's coming from my perspective right now as a producer here in London.
I think it's funny you mentioned the pink dollar. It's kind of, it exists I think, but from my experience, you might have the pink dollar, but you have the trans 10 pence. You know what I mean? It's not the same amount of money that's available to us as maybe the LG and B of the community.
I've actually been programming for a queer film festival in Hong Kong for the past 5 or 6 years, and you do find that even these kind of, like, it's been running for like 35 years, super long time for a queer film festival. And it's like, in Asia. And the conversation keeps on going. We can't really sell trans films. We need to sell, predominantly, it's like 80% of it is like gay films, and you're like, well, I'm trying to drive change. And I always give independent productions and slightly, I do watch everything. I watch trans film, non-binary films, all sorts of films, and I'm trying to get that programmed in, but they're like, are you going to sell tickets? And it's always that conversation, are you going to be able to sell tickets? And I'm usually just left with one trans film, one non-binary film, one bisexual film, and 85% of it is like gay films, because it's true, it does somehow I don't know why cinema is always packed, but I do think if we make more and we put more out there are people who want to see these films. That's what I've been driving. So I left that film festival because of just difference of opinion. I do want to drive more trans film. I do think people do want to watch trans films, that they're really well made these days as well, and they are told by us.
It's really interesting to me listening to you, because I'm not involved in the creative process as much as I'd love to be. I'm sure I'd be terrible at it. So I always really enjoy to hear about things from that side of things. I initially got involved in film because a producer working on the film Everybody's Talking About Jamie reached out to me mid-shoot. It's not a film about trans people. The central character is somebody who likes at school to dress in drag, but lots of the extras were trans and non-binary, and they hadn't put a lot of thought into what that means for those workers, essentially, on set beforehand. And they weren't having a very good time. So in a bit of a panic, this producer, who's great, I still work with her, assist producer, reached out into her networks to try and get some support in the moment and the process of that, to make it a better working space for all these extras, and found me, and we've kind of worked together on some projects ever since. And that's the bit where I kind of come in, and the bit of work that I do now in film is around, what does it mean while the creative process is going on for the transhumans on set or in that space through the whole process, to exist in that space. And I actually think one of the things that it's been really a real interesting journey for me, coming into this industry as somebody who hasn't worked in it before, and kind of learning on the job over the last couple of years, which is that I actually think the biggest central issue is not trans-specific, it's how bad and appalling the working conditions are for everybody. And it's been really shocking to see the way that the industry runs behind the screen, and the kind of hours, the expectations, the loss of unionization, the expectation to produce things in impossible things in short periods of time, with people exhausted from 18-hour physical kind of 18-hour days. And so as soon as you then have any other kind of dynamic on top of that, it's doubly hard to advocate for it or support it. And that's the thing that has been the biggest challenge for me as somebody. For example, in the last project that I worked on, I was on set with a group of trans young people who were the supporting cast. And the hardest part of the job was just dealing with the system of the set. And it wasn't that anybody on the set was horrible or badly intentioned. In fact, it was an incredibly thoughtfully put together cast and crew. The producers were both cis, but the writer is trans, and the producers have made great effort to try and have trans workers in all different elements of the kind of cast and crew through the process. But when it came to it, and you're on the set and everything's running and everybody's trying to produce a film at impossible speed, things like supporting the young people to get fed properly was actually some of the hardest work. And if they had any kind of, dietary requirements or anything like that, and it didn't turn up in the food order, there is this kind of working culture of like, oh, well, there's some leftover stale rolls from breakfast, so can't they just eat that? It's like this, and it's like, really, I just found it's really like, I think the conversation that really needs to open up is one that's much more about people's working conditions and human needs at a broader level on sets. That, to me, the lens of how do you support trans needs specifically in that process? Like, the biggest barrier, first of all, is how do you support anybody's needs in those environments? To then really support trans and non-binary people's needs specifically, in a way, because it was getting people to see the human was the hardest struggle on the set, is the honest answer.
And it can be so difficult in those spaces where it's just the norm to be treated that kind of way. And if anyone's coming from a trans perspective that needs that additional support, you can't even get to that level before you have to deal with all of the other issues that are just systemically building up around the treatment of people. So 100%. Sort of, I think that though, in these kind of spaces, like what you're saying, there is cis producers out there that are now turning to trans narrative and saying, well, we're actually going to make a conscious effort to include the people that we're talking about on the set practically, not just from a writer's perspective, but in our cast and in our sort of wider crew. Have any of you seen that kind of change as well in your environments, sort of within wider teams, or just through sort of the opportunities that are being made available?
There was a series being filmed in Dublin, and Ali and a bunch of other trans comedians read for a role for a supporting character, and they were looking for a trans character, but the people that we know read for it, there was Ali, and there was a trans man and non-binary person as well. So they wanted a trans person, but they didn't really care what flavor they were. And I mean, that's not fantastic, but like, I think, if the opportunity's there, you take it. It sort of feels like trans best friend is kind of replacing the gay best friend trope, but it's an opportunity anyway.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a broader discussion to be had about representation on screen, and the quality of it. Is it enough for us just to be on screen? Or is it enough that we need to really actually have these roles? These roles have to be better. Like, we're slowly seeing more and more of these opportunities come true. There's definitely casting agents in Dublin from an acting point of view that are, any major project that comes to Ireland, are trying to shoehorn trans actors in there, but not always succeeding. But then you look at those roles and go, is it really, it is a step forward to see somebody in the background who's trans, but if it's their stories aren't actually being told, or if those characters have no depth or say anything about the trans experience, is that representation really quality representation? And then from the other side of things, from as a screenwriter or a producer or a director, I feel like there are more and more opportunities. I feel like the likes of BFI, Screen Ireland, and the rest of the more the bodies rather than the actual industry itself are looking around going, oh, actually, there is a wave of trans cinema coming, and how do we support it? And how do we get these people into positions where they can actually control the project rather than just show up and supplement the project?
I think it's like, we've all been around. It's kind of like, come on, guys, catch up. Do you know what I mean? But in terms of like, it still feels super gate kept. Like, I'm in a position at the moment where I started having like meetings and stuff, which is exciting, and like I feel very lucky. But then there's so many hoops to jump through as a writer. And the industry isn't showing an awful lot of flexibility in terms of supporting people who are coming up through a different route, and who it's like, you're interested in telling these stories or like meeting with like interesting different people, but you're not making any extra allowances or like extending any like extra support to allow those stories to come through. And I know, I've got like a few friends who work in like below the line positions, like sound editing and camera and that, and it's like, and I was talking to Alice from Trans on Screen, who's amazing, and they were talking about the sort of logistical gatekeeping for the below the line people, where to get into like a guild or like these organizations that sort of get the jobs, you have to have signatures from people who are already in. So how do you, if you're, how? Like what, how, why? It's archaic, and it doesn't support a change in the industry. It's not just about trans people, about like people of color and stuff. There's no room for change if people are closing everything all the time and expecting all of these like old school practices in terms of like signatures. Like what? It's just bizarre to me.
I mean, I feel like myself and Becky's project together, Punchline, we were very fortunate in the sense that we weren't coddled or treated like children. We're like new filmmakers. We were making, though Becky has quite a lot of experience as a screenwriter, but they just gave us the money and let us run with it. Like, I don't mean they just trusted us. Like, this is the thing. I've been involved in certain schemes that have come on board for emerging talent, where it's kind of nearly, you're treated like a child. They gave us access to resources, but not the resource that really, really matters when it comes to filmmaking. And that's unfortunately cold hard cash. And just to add the this might seem very frivolous to me, but like I'm grateful to me. Like, it's great having these conversations with people who are more experienced in the industry, getting access to people like that. But when the reality comes to it, if you're not letting us actually make work, if you're not supporting us to directly make work, you're not supporting trans voices to make cinema.
Yeah, I would like to add, like, Alice from Trans on Screen has been absolutely wonderful in support of our trans-led short film, which is still crazy to think that we raised the amount of money we wanted to raise within less than a month to make the story happy and happen. But, given me a position of producer is to hire as many people who's non-binary or trans or at least queer behind the camera was very important for us to put together, the right team. But you do find that a lot of them might have lacked the experience to be able to be HODs, the head of their own departments and stuff. So, I'm hoping to, like to give some people the next step up if it's necessary. But then you also, given that you're a producer and you only have a limited funds, you're like, okay, we also have to get things done. So it's that balance, but I'm being very mindful of who we hire to be behind the camera, to be able to help us, get the film made at the kind of level that, I've been working in this industry for that long. I have done high-end TV stuff, and I've worked on, Hollywood productions and stuff. And, I take what I can from there and be able to adapt it within the independent production that I get to produce right now. And, like just simple, like asking people their dietary needs, and then also putting pronouns on call sheets and stuff. These are like really simple practices that should be, just norm. It should just be there, and I just think it's important to start doing it from, if it's on my production, I'm going to do what I can. I think it was important for me to participate here. I wanted people to see representation. This is a Scottish Hong Konger who went through some traumatic experience in 2019. I still get teary when I talk about the political problems in Hong Kong and also the queer space as well. I have the privilege to be able to come back to UK and be able to adapt what I've learned over the years in this industry and be able to put that back to this great story, Cut and Grow, which TOS and Trans on Screen are supporting 100%. And it's just wonderful to have those connections. And I think there is change, and it's lovely there is hope here. There is change, and we are doing it. And with this panel itself is also incredible. I don't see this happening in Hong Kong at all, and even in Asia. I think it's just incredible to know that there is so many, of you out there, and this being put together is just like, wow. Being part of it is just like, wow, for me.
No, it's lovely, and it's exciting, and it's so positive seeing sort of that response, and seeing organizations like Trans on Screen coming up from a more grassroots level and advocating for us in all of our wonders and our differences of where we've came from and what we want to tell. And I think that kind of brings us really nicely into this idea of transforming futures. And I guess the question is, what would you like to see happen in the film industry, the television industry, for trans people as we move forward?
For me, it's like, I want cis people, if you want to help trans cinema make it onto screens more, instead of having us kick in the door, please just open it and hold it for us. Let us in. Like, we're all working away. Everyone is working away. And as I was saying, there is a wave of trans cinema coming. Like, you can see it. You can see it building. There's more and more people in the industry from lower levels. And it's just seeing it filter up to get more and more opportunities to actually get more trans stories on cinema, on screen, whether it's small or big.
And if you're telling a trans story, have trans people involved in the making of it. I know that kind of seems like a no-brainer, but it's still an issue.
For me, what it makes me think about is like hope, and where's the hope? And I think if you look at different oppressed groups and representation on screen over time, then there's a kind of like trajectory of that, of represented by people who don't have that lived experience in ways that are often quite offensive. Side characters, or becoming side characters or vehicles for other characters' development. And then you get into the kind of like tragedy porn era of representation, of like the singular story is tragic. And through most of that time, a community doesn't represent itself on screen either. And I think you then start to get towards, this is very unnuanced, I'm sure there's other parts of the process, but like you start to get towards the point where you get people, actors representing their own lived experiences on screen. And there's usually a period where that's in roles that are kind of dehumanizing, or in that tragedy kind of pity porn period. And then it starts to transition further when you start to get more power behind the screen as well as in front of the screen. And it makes me think of like right now, like Heartstoppers, and a show that centers on simple kind of joy in coming out, and not the tragic story of, queer teenagers coming out and things, and how joyful that is. And I do think that with trans representation, I'm seeing hope, like with hope, that we are starting to see that shift of change behind the screen, that also means that actors and characters and representation in front of the screen is able to shift as well. And I think there's still a lot of work to do. But that's the future that I hope for, which is that, you know, as that happens, that it's also not a singular story, that like disabled trans representation and Black and people of colour trans representation gets nuance as well. And isn't, because the next thing that happens is then other experiences, like kind of intersectionality of experience, are then added onto a character in the same unnuanced way as they were before. So like, that's my hope, is that as we start to see the expansion of like trans representation and power behind the screen in lots of different roles, that happens. And I, again, not to repeat myself, but I really think that some of this is about collectivizing around broader workers' rights in the industry, because I think until, like, the biggest resistance I come across is there's not the time or money to slow down and think about putting pronouns on the call sheet, or thinking about toilets, or like these kind of really basic things on a set before you even get to, do we have the time to really think about how to reach out in networks and find a trans first AD, or a trans camera person, etc. And if there was more time and more funding for this industry to actually be slow and work in ways that it wanted to work, I think we'd start to see much better care, support, and better outcomes in creative projects as we go through them.
We live in an industry that is, a lot of us work in an industry that is a lot of ours dream job, and that's exploited a lot. Not to scare off young people who might be watching this, definitely go pursue your dream, whatever. But what we're just going to be, what I'm trying to say is, you need to stand up for yourselves as a group. As an industry, we all need to start standing up and push back, because we all want to be here so badly that we will put up with a certain amount of stuff that isn't okay and wouldn't be accepted in other industries. So just look after yourself and look after each other. One big unit. Who said that?
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that, like, my existence on the film set, I think, was quite a shock to a lot of people, which is that they made budget for me to literally come on and advocate for and look after the trans supporting cast. And I think the thing that I wish for the development of that is that that was much more normal, not just for trans folks, but for all folks who are kind of more marginalized on sets, but also that there was more time for me to also do that for the crew, who are, you know, out there working the longest hours in the worst conditions as well.
I think I'm feeling like hopeful, thinking about the timeline that Nim presented there, like hopeful for the next part. Like if the sort of people with the cash, you know, commissioners, the producers and that in this country, like in the UK and Ireland, if they can be as bold as we're being with our ideas and our storytelling, and if we continue to be bold and don't let anyone make us smaller, then things can really start shifting into like a more exciting space, and we can see some joy and some fun and some like sex and things that people don't seem to think trans people do, and it can all just be like big and nice and less trauma based for a bit, at least, maybe.
I wanted to add to one of the things that I think, I can't remember who talked about it, but anyway, well-being. I think it can't be an afterthought. I think like mental health, well-being, you know, accessibility, that should never ever be an afterthought. It shouldn't go, will be 1 month in production, it's like, oh, we need diversity or whatever, like, you know, training and stuff. It should always be right at the top. So me being producer, very mindful that it's to put that line in your budget. It has to start at least 1 month before production minimum. And I was very lucky, again, I was just mentioning on Saturday, I met a bunch of incredible panelists, and then someone who actually does well-being came up to me and said, I'm going to try and drive change that way, is to make sure that the well-being coordinator is hired early on, and any kind of production, high-end production, whatever. and be there, you know, for the crew. An intimacy coordinator, that's unheard of in Asia in general. I don't think I've ever worked with an intimacy coordinator, and I'm very privileged to actually have one here on my set, and I just made it happen. It just has to be in the line. Been working with them, and it's just wonderful to see what they can do, and just having them not just for the people in front of camera, actually they're also there for us behind the camera as well. So these are the small changes that, you know, it's just wonderful. I get teary just thinking, like, at the end, I know it's all worth it, but right now I'm developing extra ulcers and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, it's like, are we going to get there to make this film? But we all know at the end of it, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You have a team behind you. You have wonderful script, wonderful actors. And, you know, at the end of it, it's all worth it, despite the extra white hair and ulcers and stuff.
For any young filmmakers, trans and non-binary, that will watch this panel, do you have anything in particular that you would like to say to them?
I do see change. I think it is in the next generation. Like, for example, my friends' kids actually literally, like, they have not seen me the past 2 or 3 years because of COVID. Literally asked, I was like, oh, what pronouns do you use? I do think they're like only 7 and 8 years old, but I think there is change. And I think it will happen. You know, it might not be like tomorrow, but if we start now, then that change will come through. They would want to see representation when it happens. So just want to encourage the filmmakers that they just go out there and make a film. You can make a wonderful film with an iPhone or whatever you've got. You've got story to tell. You can write it. You can make it, you know, with your phone, whatever, just do it. I think it's important that your story should be told by you. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add to, you know, to the classic adage, the best camera is the camera you got. And the best story to tell is your story. Get out there and start making your own stuff. And you see now in trans cinema, the big narrative is trans people on screen. But I think, which is way more important, or as important, is trans people behind the camera as well as in front of the camera. So the only way the industry is going to change is if we're there doing the work. So do the work. Basically, I'm telling the youth of today to not be lazy.
I would just second what I said before about being bold and unapologetic and truthful. And I'd say, you know, don't wait for like big blockbusters to show you yourself. Go and look for like short films like the one that Sophia's working on, and go and watch, you know, there's a lot of like smaller scale shows coming out of America that are like really exciting, and just look around in the margins a bit, because people are out there making some amazing stuff already, and that's what's exciting. And just, I guess, don't let anyone get you down, because they'll try.
Also, like, to be authentic, right? You just need to be authentic to, like, I think if you tell your story from the heart, I always just feel like when you read something, you know, it comes from in here and it's on paper. It's just the most wonderful experience. So I just think authentic stories, you know, just be bold. I have a wonderful word, bold and authentic.
I think also I'd add, like, building on something that Ali, you said before about people in this industry kind of living their dreams, and that gets exploited a lot. Something that, like, I would say is that's like both really true, and it's an industry that works on the kind of myth of the exceptional individual. And my advice would be, you're as good as your teams, and like to reach out and build relationships with other trans folks that work in film, either because you want to work with them directly, but also because we're stronger when we're together and we can advocate. Like, it is hard to advocate for yourself in this industry. And if you have other trans people that you can talk about and share experiences, we become kind of stronger together, and more able to advocate for change as a collective.
Amazing. I think that wraps up our Transforming Screens panel. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming along today and taking the time to have a chat and to talk about things that are ultimately very positive and exciting. And I can't wait to see all of the work that all of you are involved in, and I'm sure our audiences will also be very excited for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.